Tracey Cook.
Hi there. And yes, thank you for listening to me on a Saturday afternoon.
That's all right.
I'm sure everybody's got other things they could do. I'm just here to, in support of my submission, which I'm actually wanting to oppose the council's proposal for changing the rural category for the rate differentials. Stephen Ballard, I think it was, has come up with a proposal of changing it from our current system and putting in different provisos, and one of them is to up it to 5 hectares to be considered rural. I think that's a little bit unfair because at a time that subdivisions were done at least 20 years ago, we had to justify use of the land to support the fact that it's a rural, and this was done back then. And even now, and in the next proposed plan, they're talking about still using 4 hectares as the basis for rural. So I find that quite interesting that they don't want to change it to 5 hectares. So that's my first issue I have. Rural block owners also have a lot of other expenses, so to penalise us, I suppose, to say that we need to pay the residential rates is a little bit unfair. I mean, if you live in town, you don't have to worry about stock. You don't have to worry about stock constantly damaging your fences. You don't have to worry about disposal of any shelter belts. You've got stock management as well to look after. We also have pest control, possums being our latest thing, and we get charged for possum control and possum maintenance, but I haven't yet seen any of that and get woken up on a regular basis at 1:30 in the morning with possums. So that's another issue. So to turn around and say we want to charge you residential, it's like, well, we've already got other expenses involved with having a rural block, and I think 4 hectares is probably quite a justifiable size. To say that it's a working farm, well, that's hard to prove on even a 5-hectare block, I think. So I don't think that would be particularly useful. More importantly, on my street, we're on Wolseley's Spur, and it is all been subdivided into at least 4-hectare blocks. And Wolseley's Spur has been earmarked by the council as being a significant rural outlook for the city. And we have got a lot of restrictions on what we can do on our property. We can't subdivide, we can't put buildings on the rural block because it's zoned rural. And also too, because anything you do on the hill affects what the city looks at. So based on that, and the fact that the council has said that we are a significant rural outlook for the Port Hills, and we're restricted of our activities, I think it's unfair then to turn around and say we want to charge you a residential rate for that, but you've got all these other restrictions that a rural block has. Also to the road, it's been done as a rural road many, many years ago by my neighbour, and a lot of it hasn't actually been touched or improved by the council over the last, he moved in the early 60s, and some parts of the road are still the original part from the 60s. And we do not have stormwater disposal, we do not have any sewer or wastewater disposal. Essentially, we have rural facilities. And yes, I realise that we don't get charged that minimal amount that other people in town and the urban areas do, but the significant difference between changing our rates from rural to residential far outweighs the difference that we're paying in our rates. So I would just like to finish up and say that if the council could look at another way of charging, or perhaps putting the existing people on a grandfather system, because we have got 4 hectares, we are considered rural, and on my particular road, we are all rural, and it's considered important for the city. To have that rural outlook, then I think it would be fair to keep it the way it is, and perhaps look at future subdivisions in your next plan, which you've already got some in place, about perhaps charging those people a different rate, or something in between.
Do you know what the discount is for? But you know how we've got a rural rate.
It's for not getting the same sort of services, basically.
No, it's a discount because the property is being used for active farming practices.
Yes.
So the real test is whether you're a farm or not.
Yeah.
But you don't think that's a fair...
What would you define as a farm? Because we have a pine lot. We're restricted as to how much we can plant. We also have olive trees, which is the justification on our particular property. When it was subdivided 20 years ago, they said you have to justify it as rural land. She planted a whole lot of olive trees on the property. We still have them.
Okay, so,
So it was
that is
justified
a question,
back then.
That's a question I can't answer.
Yeah.
But one of the propositions that we've kind of been putting to people, because we've had a number of submissions on this.
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Is if the alternative is that we actually review the individual properties outside urban areas to make sure that they're being rated consistently, meaning are they used for active farming practices? And what I don't know is the answer to, does what you do qualify for that? And I'm not qualified to answer that question. But you'd prefer to go down that track than to have the 4 acres, the 5 acres set as the minimum. 5 hectares.
Yeah,
right.
That's okay.
10-acre block.
I had suggested to Stephen Ballard that perhaps instead of using it as the 5 hectares as a benchmark, that in your next plan, phase 2, you're even saying rural plans, and you're still working on the 4 hectares. Now you've got me saying it as the minimum size for rural blocks still. So in phase 2, which I've got some copies of here, which you will all have because you're aware of the whole process.
Yeah.
It's still working on 4 hectares rural land, and
yeah, but that's not the reason for the discount. The fact that it's rural land is not the reason for the discount. If you have a lifestyle block, you pay, and you're residential essentially, you pay residential rates. There is a discount for people who are farmers.
Yes.
And there are farmers on those very small blocks.
Yes, well,
yeah.
Exactly. And that's fine. If the council wants to spend their time and the resources doing it to check on each person, that's fine. But I think
which is why we change.
Exactly. And I think you do need to take stress. I did say to Stephen Ballard, perhaps instead of looking at a percentage of, because they said that the house is worth, less than 2/3. That's really hard because on the hill, I would be pushed to find a house that's worth $200,000 on my section.
Yeah.
You can't build a house on a hill for $200,000.
No, I know.
It's impossible. So to say that, you wouldn't even get a farmer with an old farmhouse on it.
I think
for that division of suggestion.
The thing is that we've received a number of submissions on this, and I think that this is something that we've taken
that would be
particular
great
note
if
of.
they could take it on board. Yeah, I had suggested to Stephen perhaps they could look at the percentage of curtilage against the rural activity, the rural land.
It
versus
is
the curtilage.
purely a discount for farmers. So that's the history of it. And I'm assuming that we want to continue with that discount for farmers.
It would be interesting to see the definition of what farming is then.
Correct, and I can't offer that to you today.
Because if that's the case, then is a pine plantation farming?
I don't know, and so therefore I would maybe we'll get Stephen to follow up with you directly.
Because I think there's a few things that they need to work on before they suggest that change.
We're going to have to talk to staff around this particular issue anyway.
I think the definitions have to be set
There is no
clearly.
question that we have received the submissions and we've listened to them, and we will certainly be taking them into account.
Yeah. Just on that note, there were at least 2 neighbours of mine who have 4 hectares who weren't informed about these changes.
Yeah, and I
So
don't.
not
They may not have the differential either if they're not farming
they
their
do.
land.
I have looked at it. We've looked it up since then, and unfortunately, we were only talking about this last week, so they missed the submission time.
Yeah.
So, just to note, you probably would have had more submissions opposing this if everybody had been aware of it.
We've had quite a few. So I mean, the issue is signalled loud and clear.
That's great.
And we will be taking those submissions into account.
All right then. Well, hopefully we'll see some positive results on our part.
Thank you very much.
All right then. Thank you. Thank you, Pete.
Darren Newton.